Finally, the day is here. Welcome to the launch of the Open Innovation Report 2025. It's a true pleasure to have you here as we're exploring the evolving collaboration between corporates and startups. My name is Tobias and I'm the Innovation Director and Group Head of Sopra Steria Scale-Up. In my role, I am responsible for driving Sopra Steria Group's open innovation initiatives, and over the last 10 years, I have been working with large businesses solving real problems in collaborations with innovative startups. Over the next 45 minutes, we will examine the evolution of open innovation and how it's rapidly becoming a key mechanism for corporates seeking to develop and roll out their AI strategy. We will start to talk about the key trends shaping open innovation, and after that, moving on to the challenges. We will then, of course, continue to discussing the upsides, and particularly in the context of generative AI, answering the question, why startup collaborations are key for corporates aiming to turbocharge their AI rollout. Finally, we will actually link open innovation to Charles Darwin's and his theory, so stay tuned. One of my colleagues is adding the link to the report website in the chat window, so make sure you check it out. This year's report has a focus on AI, no surprise. This transformative tech is no longer a distant vision, it's here now, reshaping industries and redefining competitive advantages. From predictive analytics to generative AI, organizations are now embedding AI into their strategies. However, over the last month, I have had several conversations with executives in large corporates around the world. And the consensus is they struggle to roll out their AI strategies, moving from ambition to execution. They experience that the rapid pace of AI's evolution, coupled with talent shortages and integration challenges, is creating a widening gap between aspiration and reality. But you know what? This is exactly where open innovation and startup collaboration comes in. The Open Innovation Report 2025, produced in partnership with INSEAD professors Andrew Shipilov and Nathan Furr, presents a detailed analysis of how corporates are leveraging startup collaboration to accelerate AI adoption. Based on insights from more than 1,600 corporates and startups across 12 European countries, our report highlights key trends, challenges, and success strategies. And note that when we today discuss corporates, it includes both private companies and public organizations. Here to join me today in discussing these findings and more are four brilliant experts, all with first-hand perspective and experiences from working directly with corporates and startups. And I would love to introduce you to some really brilliant people. And first of all, one of the most prominent people in the European ecosystem, Noël. You're the CEO of France Digitale, a leading startup and investor association. And moving on from that, on this side, we have Liza, Donskaya. You're a director in Plug and Play, which is one of the world's most known accelerators, working with corporates, governments, and startups, investors, and universities. I remember when I first met you, we had like a 60-minute coffee break, and we were really nerding into open innovation. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, likewise, Tobias.
Next up, my good friend, Andrew Shipilov. Not only the co-author of this report, but also professor of strategy at INSEAD, teaching at your campuses in Paris, Singapore, Abu Dhabi. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Fabrice Asvazadourian, and you are the CEO of Sopra Steria Next, the Sopra Steria Group's consulting division. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Tobias.
And to you in front of the stage, or in front of the screen, I would say, feel free to drop us a quick hello in the chat window and tell us where you are from. So, moving on. What are some of the key takeaways from this year's report? Well, AI is now a strategic imperative. Open innovation has become essential rather than optional. 80% listen that 8% consider open innovation as mission critical or important of the corporates that we served. And that is up from a number at 67% in 2023. And what we also find out that almost 3/4 of large corporates have partnered with startups to work on AI. And of course, generative AI leads the agenda, where those corporates that had collaborated with startup in AI focus on exploring its potential. And what is quite interesting to see that corporates are getting better than ever at working together with startups. And almost 2/3 of open innovation projects are now a success, which is up from around 50% 2 years ago. But it's still quite low number, to be honest. So there are some things that could be even better in the future. So, as mentioned, the link to the report, it will be published in the chat. So at the end of this session, you as audience are also able to put your questions in the chat, and I can bring it up in the end. So, let's start.
Let's start.
I would say the first question I will give to you, Maja. I mean, you are the CEO of France Digitale.
I'm blushing now.
Yeah. As you know, corporate startup collaboration are really challenging.
Yes.
And what is it that you and France Digitale are doing in this space, and what are some benefits for the corporates and startups when it comes to collaboration?
So France Digitale, for those who don't know us, so we are the largest startups, scale-ups and VC network in Europe, representing a bit more than 15,000 companies in France. Among them, almost 1,000 are working on AI, but this is something we're going to talk about it later on. We're also working hand by hand with all our European counterparts, so we can have the best overview of what is going on in the tech scene in Europe. And what we are doing, I like to summarize it as creating connections. So basically, we are like a sales representative for startups, trying to explain to a large public, but mainly corporates, what is the advantage of working with startups. And also we are like advocates, and on behalf of those startups and investors, we are trying to speak to the regulators, so all the policymakers in France and Europe, to create the best environment for them to grow and scale. And so what are the advantages today to work with the startups, especially at this moment where we are working a lot with AI? I think that they could be a good fast track from research to application. They are like a laboratory where you are starting from scratch with good talents, and you are saying that it could be a shortage of talents when you want to work on deep tech subjects. So it's a good opportunity for that, especially when you know that 62% of the startups in France are developing some products or services for corporates. So there is a great fit, and we need to leverage this market. But the challenge that we are facing today is that there is a strong competition, especially in Europe, coming from the US. So we have a lot of big tech companies, and there is a real concentration of value around them, and it's very difficult for startups to grow and find some clients, first of all. And also I think that the European market is very fragmented. It's when you are a European startups and you want to deploy your product everywhere in Europe, it's quite complicated. And this is why it's also very important for them to work with companies like Sopra Steria to give them access to this big network. So this is the opportunity, but still a very strong challenge for our startup, especially when, I mean, the figures that you gave us early on was, I mean, it's encouraging because we can see that corporates today are working more and more with startups, and there is no longer this fear of working with those small companies, but still, it's still complicated. So, well, I mean, I'm optimistic, but true challenges for sure.
Yeah. No, and thanks, man. And I really like what you explained, that you're kind of partner that connecting the dots between corporate
investors
startups.
And
exactly across the Europe.
And it's not that easy because I mean, we are in this ecosystem, so we talk a lot about startups, but for a lot of people in a larger public, it's not very easy to understand. So yeah, we have to being this translator of what is going on.
Interesting. So yeah, now we heard a little bit about the value of the collaborations, and especially from the startup side. But what about the corporate view? So over to you, Fabrice. I'm curious. I mean, the AI race is definitely on.
Sure.
And a lot of large organizations are risk to be sidelined if they are not jumping into and actually doing something about this. What was interesting in our report, 6 out of 10 large corporates says that AI integration is highly important to their business. But could you explain a little bit more about the importance of artificial intelligence for corporates and why it's becoming so increasingly important and mission critical for them?
Sure. Three good questions, Tobias. Thank you. Let me first take maybe a market perspective. AI is not new. I'm an old consultant, so I've seen through different waves of AI, and for sure, with the development of a much stronger infrastructure, with the development of more computing power, we are now, since the last 10 years, seeing our corporate clients more and more integrating AI. What is new or more new, 2.5 years ago, we had the emergence, the burst of ChatGPT and generative AI. And what used to be for several years a tech topic for data scientists and AI engineer become at the same time a topic for a sexy topic for the boards and for the masses. So that's create a new environment of attention and investment around AI. Today, we assess in a study we published a few months back that corporations spend about 6% of all their IT budget on AI, and they will triple the amount they invest in AI in the next 3 years, and that will reach up to 10% of all their investment. So it's a serious topic and a serious investment line in their budget. But that's the macro view. If you look at more from a corporation standpoint, I think none of the CEO or the CXO I have the chance to meet are not convinced that we are at a moment of reinvention thanks to AI. They don't know what will be reinvented, they don't know how it will be reinvented, but they know it's there. There is a bit of, at the same time, a bit of fatigue to say that, okay, we see a lot of very interesting things in POC, in vitro, but when it goes in vivo, it doesn't work anymore. So the hit ratio of what can really work and create impact on the P&L at scale is still today quite low. So that's where they are, and that's why they understand that maybe alone they are not able to race at the right speed, and that's where cooperation with more agile startups is key. They do have internally the talent, because if you look at very large corporations, they know how to attract and develop talent. They know how to upskill their own talent. But when I look at our clients, they are super good at optimizing what already exists. Large corporations, they have the processes and they know how to optimize what already exists thanks to technology. Where they are really less good, less agile, is to try how to reinvent what they are used to do. And when they are really not good, often is at stopping what has failed quickly. They try and try harder, and sometimes they spend too much time and energy in trying too long. Where startups, I know very few startups that are successful where they have initially started. They have always reinvented them a couple of times before they reach the right product, the right solution, and they are successful. So that's my vision of our clients. And if I look at it from our more selfish lens, what do we sell to corporates? What do they ask us to do for them or with them? Probably not surprisingly, they start by asking, okay, help us to prioritize use cases that are the most promising for us. Okay. Then say, okay, we need to build. They understand that the end game is industrialization, and they ask us to build AI factories, to build and run the AI factories with them. That's another thing. So they have started. It was absolutely not the topic 2 years ago. Now the topic is a lot on AI factories. 2 years ago, we were a lot working on adoption by employees, making sure that there were that we were able to make employees be willing to use the AI solution. It's not the case, it's less the case anymore. I think employees are now willing to use. What is difficult is to anchor in the daily practices of employees. Because if you use something once a week, you don't use it. If you use it every day, then you really use it. Huh? So that's the third challenge. Make sure that it's anchored in the daily way of working of employees. Compliance. When you talk about large corporations, compliance is always somewhere around, and that's a big issue with the startups. By the way, we'll talk about it, I'm sure, later. But compliance, and with the AI Act, this is now becoming more and more stringent for large corporation, and it's not helping for the collaboration with startups. And last but not least, data platform modernization. I think everybody was putting a lot of money on choosing the LLMs, and then suddenly they were hit by the wall of the quality of data. And now I think we've been able to convince more and more clients to reinvest more on their data platform. How do we manage unstructured data? It was not done by corporations 3 years ago. They were used to manage documents, but they were not used to manage unstructured data. So they are now learning how to do it. They are buying the right tools to do it. They are putting in place the right governance to do it, and so on. So that's where we are. And that's why AI is so important at this moment. We are in the middle of the river. Everybody wants to cross the river and convince, so nobody wants to go back. But this is still very hard.
Yeah, and the problem is it's getting quite cold if you're standing in the river for a long time. And I do believe, as you mentioned, I mean, some of these core elements in the transformation and using AI, that's where the startups could have a good product that could help the large corporates to actually do things faster. Yeah. I would like to see, I mean, we talked about the corporates and how they struggle with open innovation and AI, but to further understand this question, and I mean, already in the 2023 report, we learned that open innovation has become mainstream in Europe. And since that, the interests have accelerated, much thanks to generative AI. And Liza, asking you, I mean, why are we seeing this increase in open innovation? What are the corporates and startups getting out of their partnerships?
Thanks, Tobias. Very, very interesting question. So also maybe started with a quick introduction. So as you mentioned, I work for Plug and Play, and Plug and Play we're one of the top accelerators. So we work a lot, obviously, with startups. We also one of the most active, actually, early stage investor in startups. We have a portfolio of 2,000 companies and an ecosystem of 80,000 startups. So every day we see lots of startups, obviously, wanting to work to bring their product to larger audience and to the market. And we also work with 550 corporations. And from 2012, we'll just see in the last maybe 10, 15 years that every year the number of corporations and startups that want to collaborate together just has been increasing exponentially. Why? Because obviously both they understand that it's beneficial for both sides, and there is only win-win for both parties here. If we speak about the corporations, we think that one of the primary reasons why they want to really collaborate with startups is because they understand that they need to stay competitive. They want to stay on the market. They understand that there is a lot of players like startups, innovative companies that are taking their piece of the market. And obviously, corporations don't want to lose their customers. They understand that it's really important for them to innovate, to stay on top of technologies as well. And they realize that instead of putting maybe a lot of efforts and a lot of investment first in their own innovation kind of in-house activities, it's maybe easier sometimes for them to test and try with some technologies, some innovations that have been already developed by startups. And this gives them an opportunity and the competitive advantage already very, very fast, because with the startups, with the products that they already have, they have ability to bring the product to the market in a very, very fast manner, comparing to if they had developed them in-house. So speed is actually very important here as well. And normally, if we speak also about corporations, what do they actually want? And also continuing the topic of AI, obviously they want to reduce their costs a lot, and they want to find ways to improve operational efficiency a lot. And here startups and AI startups especially come in place as well. So this is an opportunity for corporations also, instead of building a huge, teams that are working on AI in-house, as well, to use some solutions that can be implemented directly, after a few weeks, maybe or a few months of POC, directly implement into their strategies and their products. One more reason why corporations love to work with startups is because obviously they also want to improve their profitability, and sometimes these startups, they have their own customer segments, like customer bases, and it's an opportunity for corporations as well to tap into new customer segments as well by using the network of startups as well. And there are maybe two more reasons why corporations like to work with startups. So it also helps them to boost their perception of their brand, because obviously they're seen on the market as an innovator, as a leader in the industry, and that attracts a lot of talent internally. So it helps them also to attract younger generations that are willing to work and collaborate on innovative products. And also it helps a lot to change the culture within the organization, because, of course, for corporations, it's not very easy to innovate because they have a lot of old legacy systems. They have a lot of people. They have a lot of old things that are already in place. You cannot compare this to the startup that is building everything from scratch. And collaborating with startups helps them to turn a little bit, to change this culture within the organization, because they learn a lot from the startups, from their way of working. They become more agile, they become more disruptive, more open-minded. So this is something they appreciate as well, because to change the culture, it takes years, and sometimes many years to change the culture within. If we speak about the advantages for startups, why all of the ecosystem that we have, 80,000 startups want to actually collaborate with corporations, because for them it's an opportunity to get very fast access to the database, of course, the customers of corporations. It's a great opportunity for them to scale if they are able to service this customer base. It's also a great opportunity for them to get a market and validation of their product as well, especially if it's an early stage startup, because when they are being associated with the brand, the logo of this corporation, they obviously attract a lot of investors and also new customers as well, because they get more trust comparing to if it was a known startup that no one really wants to test and try. They also get an opportunity to use the resources of the corporation if everything goes right. Normally the corporation is quite open to give them a lot of advice, like mentoring, maybe some supply chain resources, some advice on regulation and other different help. Sometimes also if the POC pilots, they go well, they have opportunity to, of course, sign real deals, real contracts, and they also have an opportunity to maybe even for exit, because if everything goes well as well, corporations are ready to put some tickets and maybe even acquire the startup as well, which might be the goal of a certain startup as well. So it's only beneficial for both parties, and this is, I think, we will see in the next few years. And I know that you've mentioned also some numbers about the report, that is only the numbers are only going higher and higher in this collaboration.
Thanks a lot, Liza. And considering that there are millions of startups out there, one of the key things that's coming out in our report again and again and again is the focus on ecosystems and how corporates need to have strong connections to access to external partners. So moving on to you, Andrew, because I know this is one of your specialist topics and that you have been diving deep down in for the last years, decades. What can you tell us about why having this innovation ecosystem is so important for the large corporates at this moment?
Well, thank you, Tobias. And it's the second time that you and I work together on this research project. And even in 2023, we saw that working with others was the key to competitive advantage. And the trends that drive companies to work with one another probably haven't changed between the last 2 years, but maybe they have accelerated. So number one, of course, technologies evolve very rapidly. These days, it almost seems like they're evolving weekly. Maybe in the past they were evolving by decades, maybe by years. Now I personally have a sense that every week there's something new, some new gadget or new interesting stuff comes out. And everybody tries to understand, okay, if I adopt this new technology, would I be successful? But clearly, a large company cannot keep track of all the technologies by itself, especially if technologies arrive on a weekly basis. So they turn to smaller, nimbler organizations which are more reactive and which have those technological modules that they literally can plug and play with. And probably that's where the title of your organization comes from. You take a startup technology, you plug it into the established company, you play with it and see what happens. And the speed that the technological development only accelerates, so therefore you would need more and more of these opportunities to recombine technological modules with one another. Now, then another thing is, of course, it seems like companies need to move faster and faster. Startups can help them move faster and faster, so increase the speed, time to market. And, the world changes very rapidly, geopolitics changes rapidly. It almost seems like, every year there is some sort of a crisis. So acceleration of time to market is a way or is a trend which makes companies work with startups and startups work with established firms. And finally, and this is something maybe relatively new thing which comes more and more often, is this idea of the need for a network effect. And so the network effect is a technology becomes valuable to the extent many users use this technology. And every additional user brings a lot more value to this technology than the previous one. And therefore, ecosystems becomes important because they allow to bring a lot of users into the technology, co-opt them, and help that technology to learn itself. Because, you may know that lots of LLM providers are going to the universities and basically saying, okay, please use our LLM for free. And of course, I, as representative of a business school, very happy that somebody gives us, the technology to use. But we're obviously mindful there's nothing free in this world, and, we're happy to use it. And we also understand that when we use it, that technology becomes better. So as an ecosystem orchestrator, as an ecosystem player, you sort of live in this give and take world where you take somebody's technology, you use it, it becomes better, that creates benefits for the others. So these three things, technological change, the need to bring the products rapidly to market, and the network effect probably are the three main reasons why we now need to think about ecosystems and not necessarily internal development.
Great insights, Andrew. Thanks. And you mentioned AI before, and clearly AI is one of the key focuses of our report. It's also getting more important play on how open innovation is going to be accelerated in the corporates and how important they are for the AI strategy. And just to mention a couple of the key findings related to AI in the report, 6 in 10 corporates say AI integration is highly important to their businesses. 72% of corporates with over 5,000 employees have partnered with startups on AI projects over the last couple of years. And this is interesting. 63% of the corporates that we surveyed plan to prioritize AI in future collaborations, and particularly focus on generative AI. So, Fabrice, AI is certainly getting a huge amount of attention right now. So how do we see the AI market change in the coming years?
Thanks for the question. Maybe I will just add one point on those. I fully agree with what says. I think you have time to market and you have time to fail. I think with so many technologies, what is important for a large corporation is to test and learn. If you look at all the technology buzz we had in the recent years that today have almost disappeared. Failing fast is also very useful, because what is really hard at large corporation is taking a new technology and putting it on top of the legacy system. The landing of the new technology that's a heartbeat of 1,000 billion things to a legacy system with a heartbeat of 60 beats per minute, it's very hard and very, very complicated. So you need to do it only when you are sure that it's going to be successful. That's also, I think, the core value for large corporations to avoid putting too much stretch on their existing IT system. What is going on? So first of all, if I knew exactly what is going to happen in the coming years on AI, I would be very rich. So just as a disclaimer, but still, what we see at our clients, and it was I think it was already a bit mentioned by Liza. We see a trend from our clients to say, okay, we want AI to deliver efficiency gains. We want to see impact on P&L. And as I said earlier, large corporations are very good at optimizing what exists. So they come back to basics. Let's use AI to optimize what we have. Which means that probably we are going to see more and more what I call, the consulting world, it's very, very dangerous to use consultant word, but I call smart lean. So the usage of AI in the process reinvention or process reengineering methodology to make sure that you can track benefits, savings, and deliver them quickly. So that's where we see the most attention today. Obviously, the agentic AI emergence of the recent months is going to fill that big time. And we see all the software providers, or the large one, coming with their agent, with each of a specific name, so it's difficult to remember all the names. But we will see more and more the SaaS, so the solutions that are on SaaS, evolving to try to extend their value added to some part of the processes. So that will help corporation to drive more and more efficiency. So that's for me the main topic of the next 2 years. We will, as soon as it will be up and running internally within each corporation, we will see probably more and more corporations starting to work on their supply chain, on how they, as Andrew mentioned, about how do we use AI to generate efficiency within ecosystem. As always, it is in between two organizations that you have the most inefficiencies. So when you have done the work where it's easiest internally, probably we will see, and we start to see, very, very promising initiative around how to use AI to optimize ecosystem. Could be supply chain, could be circular economy, and so on. So that's probably going to come very, very quickly. And the last, but probably the most difficult one, where probably today large corporations are still a bit hesitating, it's how can we really use AI to reinvent the client relationship, to reinvent the value proposition we provide to our end users. There have been a lot of dreams 2 years ago. There have been a lot of disappointment over the last 12 months, but it will come back at some point. AI for reinventing the value proposition, expanding the territory of a company.
Yeah, and elaborate on what you say. I mean, as Andrew said, I mean, it's coming new solutions, products almost each week, and it's not only a pain for the corporate leaders are sweating because they're feeling that the world is moving so much faster than themselves. And it seems like that's one of the kind of good timings where corporates really collaborate with startups in order to get faster and faster and try to get up with the AI race that we talked about earlier. And it's quite important and quite interesting, I would say, that the report shows that corporates, they're viewing startups much more important for their own strategy than what the startups believe they are for the corporates. And yes, we have a number on that as well. And I think it's quite interesting that like 70% of the corporates says that startup is a vital part of the AI strategies. And when we asked the same question to the startups, only 47 of them thought they were important for the startups. for the corporates. So that also means that, okay, the startups are thinking they have not so much to add, but the big players, the big organizations, they are like looking for who can we collaborate, who can do the things faster. And that is kind of interesting. And moving on from that, I mean, Liza, both of you have vast experiences that these collaborations, they meet obstacles of various dignity. So, and I know that at Plug and Play, you and your colleagues you're mentoring startups. And why do you think there is a misalignment of perception between corporates and startups when they do these collaborations?
Indeed, I mean, this is something that I think quite known in general, that there are different perceptions, I guess, and the misalignments between the perception how startups and how corporates see different things and how they see in general things differently, because I think the most crucial in this to answer to this question is differences in the culture, in the way of working, and also in the expectations of both sides, startups and corporations, and also in their priorities. So if we talk about the biggest difference is also speaking about culture, I think first of all what is important to mention is the notion of time and the decision-making process. And we spoke with Fabrice earlier, we were working a lot with banks and financial institutions especially, but not only. I think the notion of time and decision-making process is really crucial here to understand. So for the startups, especially when it's an early stage startup, normally they would have very limited resources, and when I say resources, I mean financial resources, time, and also like human resources. They may have really very small team, so they would normally have money for 3 to maybe 6 months. Would be their maximum to survive, in order to do things quickly, in order to prove their results, in order to show that the product is working, and in order to build the relationship with corporations and with their clients. And when they start working with big organizations, corporations, the perception of time is completely different. So for the corporations, in order to move forward, for example, with signing NOD, signing any contract in order to start working with the startup, they might take weeks or sometimes months, and some examples might take even years before they will put the signature on the contract. And why? Because they have a lot of internal alignments that need to be done within the organizations. They have different business units like legal, IT, compliance, procurement. The corporations tend to have agreements and to align and to discuss all those little things with all of the stakeholders, and they cannot move forward without having their yes. And obviously that makes startup feel very nervous. And answering your question, they really don't understand, and the corporation, they don't have the same sense of urgency. Second, I think the decision-making process is really slow due to the same factors that I mentioned before, because they need to align with many different business units internally, and also the approach to risk is very different. So for the startups, they are ready to take any risk because they understand they need to, if 6 months is over and they don't have customers, they are out. They need to start from scratch again. While corporations, they do everything to actually limit and their risks and not to take any additional risk as much as possible. So this is where there is misalignment as well. And the third one is probably about agility. So startups also, they build everything from scratch. They don't have the old legacy systems, to comply with. They can build everything as they like. They have an opportunity to pivot. Also, if they see things are not working the way they should work, they can pivot and they just change their mind and they do something else. But corporations typically have to implement their new solutions, like solutions of the startups, on top of their own old legacy systems, and it takes a lot of time. It's not easy at all, and again, they have to go through this circle of approvals from IT, legal, compliance, and all of the other stakeholders. So I think here we see like the typical misalignment comes from from the perception and from the culture, indeed.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it sounds like culture plays a big part here of where the barriers for the good collaboration actually is a showstopper, so to say. And also in the report, I mean, the culture was the biggest barrier for why the collaborations between the corporates and the startup was not successful. So, I mean, regarding the core challenges when it comes to this collaboration, I mean, Andrew, can you outline some of the other challenges that open innovation projects experiences?
Well, think about ecosystems, right? This concept comes from biology, from natural sciences. And in nature, there are some forces which attract participants in ecosystem, and we talked quite a bit about them, and there are some forces which repel them. And in this report, we clearly see that there are some barriers for collaboration. So when you ask the corporates, so what are you concerned the most about? They're saying that it's about legal and regulatory constraints. So a typical reason why a corporate would not wish or would find it difficult to work with a startup would be, well, the laws don't allow us, the regulations don't allow us, so we are having a trouble. When you ask startups, they're saying that, wait, the problem which we see is that you guys don't pay attention to us. So you corporate people, you invite us, you sort of treat us as curiosities, but you don't pay attention. So if I were working for an established firm, for an incumbent, certain things I would take away from this report is, those startups, they need attention. And despite the fact that you do feel the regulatory requirements, which probably not going to go anywhere, do pay attention to these startups, have somebody in your organization whose job actually is to focus on organizational attention to the startups on their daily lives. The fact that they're operating at a different time clock, and make sure that your organization don't view startups as basically this next shiny toy, but something to treasure and cherish as an object of collaboration. Then the next force which keeps the organizations apart is this concern for the intellectual property. Because clearly open innovation, that means, I bring an idea to the company. Who owns that idea? And what happens when they're underlying IP? And also what happens if I work with your organization, you may learn something from my company and I don't want you to learn about that. And so how do we on the one hand make sure there is information flows between the startups and the established firms that create value? But then how do we also make sure that every partner in an open collaboration captures that value? And I've just recently had the pleasure of publishing an article in MIT Sloan Management Review where we're literally talking about those ways to both protect the IP and the ways to unfortunately appropriate IP from the partners. And you see that in many instances where companies, when they work with one another, they could do talent poaching. Startup works in established company decides not to work with a startup, but they hire their chief technology officer. And another way to to learn from that collaboration is reverse engineering. Meaning that, let's say, a company gets the code from the startup, and the code is a black box, but then the technologists reverse engineer that code, and then the startup is left with nothing. It could be even cyber espionage and many other strategies that organizations could use to appropriate the knowledge. And then the job of both the startup and the established firms to clearly have the protocols, which is the knowledge we can share, which is the knowledge we cannot share, and how do we protect that unshareable knowledge, or knowledge which is off limits. So these are the things that we need to consider. But there is still hope, right? So I don't want to sound very put the damper on the excitement of open innovation and collaboration. Despite this misalignment and despite the risk of knowledge leakage, report shows there is hope. Because now almost 2/3 of the respondents, they say they are actually happy with the outcomes of the open innovation. Maybe engineers,
They hire from the startups.
maybe are those people who were hired from the startups, but in general, across the startups and the established firms, 2/3 say they're happy. In the last report, which we did in 2023, this was 58%. Yes. So there's already some increase on the order of about 10% between 2023 and 2025 of happiness in that ecosystem, which despite of those couple of negative things I mentioned, that ecosystem seemed to be thriving.
And what's even more interesting, elaborating on what you say, we see the success metrics are going up, which is good. But despite all the barriers that the collaboration projects actually are exposed for, the corporates that have previously had done collaborations, they want to do it again. So, I mean, there are some interesting mechanisms here that means that, okay, there are some barriers, but the upside is even more great potential. Moving on, I see time is running really hard and fast. And I mean, despite these barriers, and as we mentioned, Maya, the culture between the corporate and the startup is critical in the role of success. But what are some of the key success for these partnerships?
Well, I'm still a bit curious of who are the respondents to this report, because I think that if you are asking the question to the Chief Innovation Officer or the people who are in charge of the IT or the buyer itself, I don't think that the answer is exactly the same, because the relationship between a corporate and startup is still a bit risky. But that's normal, and you have to accept this risk. And when you are talking to the buyers into the corporates, you can see that the first job they have is to manage the risk. So there is this contradiction, and so still this cultural gap that you have to fill. And the key success for me is really to train those people to really understand what is a return on investment and put them into this role of investing into something. And as you said before, I think that today in the technology is compulsory because things are going so fast that it's impossible to do it inside your company. And there is still always this question of make it or buy it. But I think that today, sometimes it's impossible to make. So you really have to accept that it's important to work with startups. And you have to take them for what they are. So, I mean, for me, it's kind of a breathing space, like you were talking about biology. But for me, being in a small company is the best way to act like a lung, meaning that you are turning yourself to the outside. Whereas when you are in a big company, it's more, I would say, a bit political, so you are more focusing on the people inside. And so you have to work with them because it's like an exploration, but still exploration is not just an inspiration. This is something that has a real value. And I think it's something that we have to understand, is that the relationship between a startup and a corporates, if you want to make it a success, it's really understanding what are the objectives for the corporates. What do you want to do? Do you want to make some optimization? Do you want to find some new business line? Do you want to find some new way of interacting with your clients? And when the project is very clear, you have to really define what is the timeline. And why the timeline? Because time is money and cash is king for small companies. So you really have to put the value into what you are experiencing. And that may be the first thing that startups are fearing, despite the fact that it's quite complicating to get a contract because of the compliance, because of the ownership of the data and the algorithm at the end. But the first thing is really a startup. The first thing is to say, I'm going to put some time and some energy into that project, and I just need some money to be sure that afterwards it will be a success for me. And I think that it's a win-win situation. And I will also add, and you were right before when you were talking about the ecosystem and that nothing is free. One of the things that our startups in Europe are facing today is the competition, as I said before. And there are a lot of big tech that have some money to invest into marketing and give some free advice and free services, but it's not free at the end. And our small startups don't have the money to do so. So I think that there is a kind of responsibility also from the corporates to when they have several providers in front of them, to really define what is the value or what is happening.
Frank, great insights, and great insights to all of you. I mean, time is running when we're having fun, of course. So I would like to just thanks to all of you for great insight. And now, as I mentioned previously, I would like to throw out the floor to some of the questions into our chat. So I'm going to deep down and see what we have here. Okay, this is one question from the chat, because we basically have time for one of them. And the question is like this: I feel like I barely have enough time to manage my own business and team, so bringing in a third party like a startup to work this closely feels like a big challenge. How do I best manage an open innovation partnership so that it doesn't distract from my own business? So maybe Maya, let's continue on what you said. Like a short answer on this one. Do you have any good ideas how to best manage this open innovation partnership so it doesn't crash with the
As I
existing
said,
business.
it's a question of objective because it's not something that you have to put on your charge on top of all you have already what you have to do. I think it has to be aligned with your main objective. So you have to define what is the purpose of working with the startups. What do you want to solve? Well, is it optimization, business line? And depending on that, maybe you're not the right person to do so. So the person inside the corporate company is very important because you are whether an investor, a client, you are really working on your own subject. So it has to be aligned, first of all. And also what I see on the market today, if there are some failures, because there was some difficulty to really define the use case at the very beginning. And especially in AI today, I think that a lot of people are working on it because they want some inspiration. They know that this is a trend and they have to be on it, but they don't really know what they want to solve. So focus on the issue you want to solve.
Yeah. And to elaborate on that, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I had a customer meeting with one of the large insurance companies in Germany. And one of the first questions was basically asking, okay, do you have a clear strategy for what you're going to build in-house, what you're going to buy and murder, and what you're going to do with partners? And as you mentioned, I mean, if you don't have a clear answer on what you're going to do within build, buy, or partner, I think that is where you risk that the startup is going bankruptcy or the project doesn't get the attention that it should have.
Yeah, and you waste some time at the end.
Yeah.
And you waste some time and money and
Yours
resources.
and the startups, yeah.
Exactly. Well, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation with some really valuable insights. I have learned a lot, and I mean, thanks to all of you here in the studio, Maya, Fabrice, Liza, Andrew.
Thank you, Tobias.
Thank you, Tobias.
Thank you.
I mean, in the beginning, I promised to dive into Charles Darwin in the end, and we're closing into the end. So, I mean, Darwin's theory of evolution says it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survives, but the one that is most responsive to change. And what really sticks into my mind during our conversation here today is that open innovation has become a key strategy to faster adapt in the AI race. And the AI race for the corporates is tough. Essentially, open innovation becoming a central mechanism to build resilience and at the same time transforming large organizations to stay relevant. So going in for landing, I will finish this session challenging our corporate listeners to go back and ask yourself, how well equipped are your organization to leverage on collaboration with startups? So I have a couple of questions and statements that I would like you to think about. 1, does your organization have the necessary capabilities for successful open innovation projects? 2, is your company attractive enough to get access to the best startups? And lastly, 3, would you be able to roll out your AI strategy faster, leverage on open innovation? Yes, then it just remains for me to say that I hope you have enjoyed the talk and learned something today. So don't forget to check out the new report website. The link is still in the chat window. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.